All right, I'm told all the jurors are present at this time. Everyone ready at this point? And for the record, all the exhibits have been reviewed by both the state and the defense and are present?
That's true, Judge.
All right. Okay, then at this point, let's go get the jury. All right, members of the jury, at this point, both the state and the defense have rested their case. The attorneys will now present their final arguments. Please remember that what the attorneys say is not evidence or your instruction on the law. However, do listen closely to their arguments. They are intended to aid you in your understanding of the case. Each side will have equal time, but the state is entitled to divide their time between an opening argument and a rebuttal argument after the defense has given its closing argument. All right, so at this point, state ready to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then you may proceed. There are two sets of jury instructions that were each, one for the state and one for the defense. I just wanted to make sure each of you got those.
Good morning. First off, let me take this opportunity to thank you guys. It's been a long 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. And all of us here appreciate your time and your attention, because this is certainly a serious case. And without jurors, serious cases can't be decided. So thank you from all of us here. Folks, I'm going to try to be as brief as I can, but frankly, that's going to be difficult. So bear with me. Do you remember in the beginning of this case, if not Grant, then who? Right? Opening statements, that was the theme. And so the defense had said to you that this is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, that's a misstatement of the law. Every time a defendant is charged with a crime, it doesn't matter the crime. Could be murder, could be petty theft. The state has the burden of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And part of that burden includes proving that the defendant is the one that committed the crime. Now, I'm not just saying that because I'm a lawyer. I'm going to show you the instruction that the judge is going to give you. And that's the law you are to follow. Okay? And you'll see right there in that instruction that the state has the burden of proving the defendant committed the crime. So, here it is. Okay? That's the actual instruction that you'll get. And it says that the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, and that means you must presume or believe the defendant is innocent. And that presumption stays with the defendant through each course of the proceedings. It also says that to overcome this presumption of innocence, the state has the burden of proving the crime to which the defendant is charged was committed, and the defendant is the person that committed the crime. That's what I just told you. Okay? The defendant isn't required to prove or disprove anything. And so whenever the words reasonable doubt are used, you are to consider the following. In typical legalese, we will explain what reasonable doubt is by telling you first what it isn't, right? Well, what is it not? It is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, an imaginary, or a forced doubt. Such doubts as those must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. If, on the other hand, after carefully considering, comparing and weighing all the evidence, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if having a conviction, it's one which is not stable and wavers and vacillates, then the case is not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. I know you guys can read. So, how does the state prove that the defendant, in this case, or in any case, is the one that committed the crime? How do we meet this burden? Well, we've all seen TV shows. There's witnesses, right? Eyewitnesses, people who saw the crime. Well, we had eyewitnesses in this case. Margaret Amato, Chad Amato, and Cody. Those were your eyewitnesses. The defendant killed them. This event occurred inside of a home, the most private of all places. No exterior witnesses visually. But does that mean that there are not witnesses? Well, certainly not. There are witnesses that heard things, if you recall. And I'll go through this in detail later. 4 gunshots between 8:30 and 9:30 that evening. There are expert witnesses that testified about various topics. Digital forensics, that's a witness. GSR, that's a witness. Family members who testified about the practices of the family. Friends who testified about what people's activities were like. Off the top of my head, Chris Sisko testifying that Cody was never late to work. He was always there by 6, even earlier, right? Those are witnesses. Even these 3 dead bodies, they tell you a story. And I'm going to explain how as we go through this. Sometimes, going back to how we prove cases, there's DNA, right? Everybody loves DNA. CSI, science, DNA is exciting stuff sometimes. But what kind of case is DNA useful for? What kind of DNA can people get? Can the experts collect? Well, here's an example of a case where DNA is very useful. Not related to this case at all. There's a fight in a bar. The defendant in that fight has a knife in his pocket. And he stabs the victim in the stomach and cuts him. And that knife has blood of the victim on it. The defendant leaves, and he leaves the bloody knife in his car. Police find the knife, they see the blood, they test the blood. There's no explanation for that, right? That's a nice, easy example of when DNA is great. This case, DNA is a red herring. In other words, it's not really going to be that significant. And this is why. And Kristen Snyder and Arthur Rubart, I'm pointing to them if they're here, they told you they didn't process things for a reason. Not because they're incompetent, not because they're lazy, not because they don't want to do their job, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because the evidence had begun to point to the suspect. Law enforcement didn't find the suspect. The evidence led them there. And so, what was the point of swabbing a door that doesn't have any signs of forced entry, or a key where the defendant doesn't even have a key to the house? What was the point of swabbing a countertop or the desk where Margaret was laying dead? There was no point. Or the wine glass, I believe, was even brought up. Or the bag of frozen chicken, right? What's that going to get you? Nothing. It's fodder for lack of evidence. That's what that is. They should have done this. They should have done that. No, they shouldn't have. They did nothing wrong. They processed that scene unbelievably. They followed every protocol. So, DNA. Aside from the facts of this case, let's think about something else. Bran Amato, the defendant, is a medical professional. The nurse deals with blood all the time. Biology classes, knows about DNA. So if one knows about DNA, do you think someone's going to leave their DNA behind something? On a cell phone clip, or their clothes, or anything else? No, of course not. That's an area of expertise that the defendant had. And he took advantage of that. So, remember that. Now, sometimes there's a confession. Sometimes there's a confession. Sometimes, like Perry Mason or those Law and Order shows, the defendant cracks under questioning and finally confesses. The weak-minded defendant, I should say. Well, investigator Danny Anderson and Eva Marie Moltari did their best to find the truth. And the defendant refused to give them that truth. And there may be arguments about police tactics, and the police lied to him, and they lied about this, and they lied about that. They're allowed to do that. That's their job. Their job is to find the truth and to motivate somebody to tell the truth. And if you tell somebody, yeah, we don't have anything on you, but, tell me what happened. How effective do you think that's going to be? It's not going to be. And so that's why the police are allowed to be creative in their interrogation. That's why they can do what they do. So, what did Gran Amato do? Can you get the sound, Judge?
I, of course, did what I always did, where I kind of didn't admit to it.
He did what he always did. And that's right from his interview. And you can listen to the interview. It's in evidence. I implore you to do so. That's what he did, what he always did, and he continued to do throughout that entire interview. It was story time with the police, with Gran Amato. Now, I will tell you in that interview, there are nuggets of truth. And those nuggets of truth change throughout the course of the interview if you listen to it very carefully. And I have some examples that I'll play for you. But at the end of that interview, there's what's called a tacit confession. And that's just a fancy way of saying you were accused of doing something horrendous and said nothing in response. And you'll see that towards the end. I'll play it for you. But it's in the entire interview. Like I said, please watch it. So how else do we do this? How else do we prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Well, we look for other types of evidence. Evidence that's more difficult to destroy or to murder. We turn to computer forensics, which, by the way, is physical evidence. We turn to GSR, which is physical evidence. We turn to evidence of fabrication at the crime scene, which, of course, is physical evidence. We exclude other possibilities, reasonable possibilities. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We show motive, the why, and opportunity, how. So, before I get to the actual reasonable doubt part of my conversation with you, I want to show you how the state proved the case beyond every possible, speculative, imaginary, or enforced doubt. Stuff that we don't have to do. Okay? I'm going to show you how we did it. Based on the defendant's stories. Here's the instruction again. Just so you know that what I say comes from an authority. Now, I'm going to give a couple different scenarios, and for the sake of uniformity, because the defendant gave so many different versions of the offense in his statement, I'm going to use the last one. And let's see, I believe I have.
I had told my mom that, I'm going to be close, I'm going to be local, I'm going to be like down the street. Mm-hmm. And then, so I left. And then,
Thank you after that. It's 6:30 to argue about it.
I'd say like 9:30 or something.
That's the first version. I just wanted to play that for you to refresh your memory. Here's the last version.
I don't know what time I actually left, but I think it was closer to like midnight or something.
Okay, all right. Closer to midnight. That's going to be our timeline for my discussion, okay? So, let's talk about imaginary and speculative doubt. All right? The random home intruder. The random home intruder. Now, Gran Amato says, the defendant says, that he was in that house with his mom all day. And we have established now through this last version of the events that he left at 12 o'clock. So we know then, based on his story, and I call it a story for a reason, from the moment he got up on the 24th until midnight, he was home, which means there was no home intruder between the hours of the 24th all the way until the 25th at midnight. Okay? You with me? Now, What does that mean? It means this intruder had to have entered this house after midnight. After midnight, so after Brant leaves and supposedly drives around for hours and hours. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Were there any signs of forced entry in that house? I'm not going to show you the pictures of the house, okay? You can look at them if you want. But the answer is no. No windows are broken. No doors are jimmied. No locks are banged off. No holes are drilled anywhere. No broken glass. I believe the testimony was, and by all means you use your memory for your recollection of the testimony, but I recall Arthur Rubart saying that all the windows and doors were secured, right? Random home intruders don't have a key, so that's out the window. So what does that mean? Well, let's make some assumptions, which you're not supposed to do, but let's make some assumptions for the benefit of this story. That this random home intruder was awfully kind and decided he wasn't going to kick a door in or bust a window. And he made entry the exact same way that Deputy Todd Moterson did, even though this intruder doesn't have 25 years of law enforcement experience and knows how to slide a lock, but regardless. He slides that back door lock with the nefarious cabinet of an empty marijuana grow armoire, okay? So this random person, at sometime between midnight, and it's got to be 6 because Cody didn't get to work, so we know that Cody didn't make it to work by 6, so it had to have been between this time frame. This random intruder jimmies that lock in the back door, sees this massive armoire, and you saw plenty of pictures yesterday how big this thing was, pushes it across the tile floor in the kitchen in the middle of the night, okay. Walks in, and what does he find? Let's say it's at midnight, or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. What does he find? He finds Margaret Amato sitting at her desk. We know she's sitting at her desk because dead bodies don't move on their own. Sitting at her desk, not doing anything. Not doing anything. Remember all that testimony about computers? The last time a human being touched that computer was 4:44 p.m. Remember that? 4:44 p.m. So that means Margaret Amato had to have been sitting at that desk. Where am I at now? Midnight? 6 hours. Just sitting there. Doing nothing. Intruder walks in, pops her in the back of the head. Puts a bullet hole right in the back of her head. Okay, now, dead bodies don't move themselves, so let's go to the next one. Chad the dad. Chad the dad's in the kitchen. Now, let's talk about that. Somehow this intruder kills Margaret, runs across the other side of the house to where Chad is still wearing the clothes he was wearing when he left work. Remember that video at CVS? He's wearing those jeans, the black shoes, the white shirt, the white socks, and I think it was like a gray shirt, or a gray-brown shirt, right? With his lunchbox by the floor. So sometime between midnight and 6 a.m., Chad is standing in the kitchen with his head facing up to the cabinet. We know his head was facing up because if you remember the testimony from the medical examiner yesterday, she said the trajectory from the bullet was down to up. So what is that inference? Well, he's probably going towards the cabinet, putting stuff away. So he's standing with his head to the cabinet, his back to where the shooter is. The shooter comes all the way around the back side of the house. And by the way, Chad apparently can't hear because he didn't hear the bullet ring out with his wife when she got shot. And bang, second shot of the night, of this mystery night. Bullet in the back of his head. He goes down. Amy testified that first shot wasn't necessarily fatal. He's still alive. And you can see, you don't need forensics to see those fingers in the blood. Those are his hands. His hands were covered in blood. And we'll talk about that later too, because there was one finger that wasn't. But anyway, this intruder then, second shot, kills him. Okay, now, don't forget, there's 3 people in the house. So now somehow, use your imagination. I mean, we're in the imaginary doubt section of my presentation. This intruder materializes immediately across that utility hallway and up against the wall, parallel to where Cody Amato is just hanging out in the garage doorway, wearing the clothes and the badge and his backpack that he was wearing the night before. He was standing right there in that doorway. Shoots him in the face. Mom, sitting there at that desk for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours doing nothing. Chad in the kitchen. Don't worry, we'll talk about the gun in a little bit. Cody in the doorway. All right? How is that possible? It's not. And remember, at this time, Cody has heard at least 2 shots, mom and dad, maybe 3, if it was 1 on mom and then 2 to dad, and he didn't do anything. Okay? The random intruder then finds Cody's gun. Okay? Finds his gun. We know that that gun isn't on Cody when he walked in that house. And it's easy to tell why. 2 very obvious reasons. 1, there was no holster in the bag. There was no holster on his person. Okay? 2, we established through a witness that knew Cody, that said he was responsible gun owner, and that you would never keep that gun in a bag because that gun has no safety. So if he were to keep that gun in that bag and he's walking around with that thing jangling around, that gun's going to go off, possibly. Okay? No evidence of anything even remotely asserting that he was carrying that gun. So I go where the evidence takes us. The gun was in the house. This random person found that gun, opened the gun, went outside, fired 4 rounds outside. At some point, they hear gunshots in Chilliwack all the time, apparently, right? So then that particular random intruder takes those 4 shell cases from Cody's gun in one hand, probably wearing gloves since there's no DNA on it, and picks up the shell casings from the other gun that he actually used to kill these people. Then he takes the shell cases from Cody's gun and he plants them where they were in the house. Okay? This is a random person now. This is the random thing. When I'm talking about the defendant, he then, I'm not even going to get into the accesses Chad Amato's phone, deletes phone calls, adds Gran Amato, because he's a benevolent random intruder, adds Gran Amato as a person who's authorized to access Dad's checking account. We're going to skip all that for now. Okay? We're just going to forget that evidence. Okay? Then he leaves it. He takes nothing. Takes nothing. You saw the pictures of electronics in there? Not a single thing out of order, out of place, stolen, removed, kicked, rummaged through. Nothing. Random person just came in the house, killed 3 people. Not very likely. Not reasonable. We have to imagine it to happen. Now, let's talk about possible divorce outs, okay? The drug deal gone bad. The nefarious combination of drugs, ammunition, and guns. Well, you saw the evidence. How many guns were in that house? You heard the testimony. You saw the guns. 3 guns. 3 guns. One was Cody's gun. One was the gun that Chad had backwards on his hip, which we'll talk about later. The other was a gun inside of a gun safe. Remember that testimony? The gun was in the safe. You know how a gun in a safe can't shoot people? Okay. So there's 3 guns. That's it. And the nefarious drugs. Pot. Pot. 3 jars of pot? Okay. A grinder? Okay, where you can process it so you can bake it, eat it. Yeah, maybe they don't smoke it. There was no wrappers or pipes, but, I'm not casting any aspersions, but I think everybody knows there are multiple ways to consume marijuana. So this drug dealer, also very, very considerate, busts in the house. Well, doesn't bust in the house, right? Comes in through a door quietly in the middle of the night, the same way as our random intruder. And the same facts are there. There are 3 people in that house at the same time under this scenario. And apparently none of them reacted to anything. And apparently our random intruder and our drug dealer is able to dance through space and time and get in 3 places at the same time. Right? And he's an extra benevolent drug dealer because he left the drugs. And the guns. And the bullets. The same bullets that were found in Cody's gun, by the way. So, that's the 4th step. It's a possible step. What's another 4th step? What's the original 4th step? The forced doubt that the defendant tried to create. Can you guess where I'm going with this? The murder-suicide. That's the forced doubt the defendant tried to create at that scene. And how do we know that? Because while the defendant may know a lot about biology, he doesn't know a lot about computers, even though he built them. And he doesn't know a lot about iPhones. He doesn't know a lot about ballistics. He knows how to shoot a gun. But as far as rifling marks and projectiles and trajectories, he doesn't know everything. This is how we know, because he made mistakes. So, let's talk about this forced doubt scenario. All right, we'll walk through it. All right. So, I skipped a clip, and I'm not going to go back. You can listen to it. I'll take my word for it. Eva Marie Moltari confronts the defendant and says, if something were to happen in that house, Bran, what would it be? And Bran says, a gunfight between Cody and my dad. Remember that in the interview? Okay? This is the beginning of this forced doubt. Now, let's work through it. The defendant leaves at 12, according to him. And according to him, Chad and Cody are fighting in the kitchen. And this is at midnight he leaves. And Mom is still sitting in her office in front of her computer doing absolutely nothing from 4:44. Nothing. All right. So he leaves. Cody tells Grant, quote, he will take care of it. That was mentioned several times in the interview. Cody said he'd take care of it. Cody said he'd take care of it. Planting that seed. Well, how does that work out? And that's the beginning of these slides here. Trajectory. Okay? We know where that bullet came from, that first bullet that struck Chad Amato in the back of his head. Follow the laser. Lasers don't bend. The person who killed, I should say, the defendant who killed Chad Amato was standing in this line of sight. Okay? Why is that important? Why is that important? Because if it was a gunfight, you would expect to see trajectories crossing. So that can't happen, right? That can't happen. We know that Margaret, she was shot in the back in the line of that particular laser beam. So, again, this person, Cody, I'm going to say it, even though it's unreasonable. Cody gets in a fight, shoots his dad. Mom sits there, does nothing, shoots his mom, or vice versa. Shoots his mom, dad does nothing, then shoots his dad, and then is broken up over the whole thing and shoots himself. Right? Because he was going to take care of it. Now, I want to show you something else here. That's the ricocheted bullet, the side of that door going to the garage from the workout room. Christine Snyder testified that the bullet most likely came from an area parallel to where that wall was. So in other words, if this counter here is the wall, and this here's the door that goes into the garage, okay, the person who pulled the trigger and killed Cody was standing like so as he walked in the door. Not indicative of a suicide. You should not take Christine Steiner's word for it. The medical examiner yesterday told you, not a suicide. None of these were close-range shots. Close range being a term of art, of course, 2 to 3 feet. And in other words, it wasn't like this. And nobody's arm goes out 3 feet. I guess the point I'm trying to drive home with these ridiculous examples, because that's what they are, is that these people were murdered one at a time. It's the only way. And that's the evidence telling us that. It's not conjecture. It's not a reasonable, that's the evidence, the physical evidence. They weren't all there at the same time when they died. There was no intruder. There was no drug deal. No murder-suicide. We've eliminated all those. Jason, I don't even want to give it credence, but Jason has an alibi. He saw the receipt of BJ. It was for $40, minus some gift cards. He was with his wife and their kids. Jason doesn't even go to the house that often anyway, to begin with. Law enforcement shook him down. I think his words were stormed his job. Probably scared the bejesus out of him. And they determined he wasn't a suspect. Now, let's talk about reasonable doubt. Now, I'm going to tell you what the state submits is what actually happened. Okay? We're going to walk you through it. And myself through it, frankly, because it's been a long 2 weeks. Grant lived at 2112 Sultan Circle. Okay? Grant fell in love with a woman named Sylvie. Not only did he fall in love with her, he became obsessed with her, to the point where that was all that mattered to him. He had lost his job, he was depressed, he was having a contentious relationship with his father and his brother. He finds Sylvie and becomes consumed with her. Now, you haven't seen these, they're in evidence. But these are bank records from the Amatos. Okay? Credit card statements, checking account statements. And by all means, I implore you to look through these. And when you do, you will see a compendium of charges to the MyFreeCams website. I just picked, here's a random page. And for the record, this was Exhibit 350. It's dated, this particular page is dated November 20th. And on November 20th, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 transactions, each $5.99.99. That's hundreds, by the way, not $5, for this particular website to tip this woman. On the 21st, the next day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 transactions for almost $600 a piece, $5.99.99. And it goes on, guys. I mean, I'm not going to belabor the point, but look at it. According to my notes, I'm not good at math, fair warning, $20,000 in one night. 20 grand. And it's in here. The checking and credit cards alone was in excess of $169,000 over 6 months. If that's not the definition of unhealthy obsession, I don't know what is. During that 6-month time period, you guys had great questions about that. You asked about when pictures were taken that were located on that thumb drive, right? Pictures of what? All kinds of pictures. I'm not going to show these to everybody, but you remember these, right? 627 of them. But what else was on that thumb drive? This is Exhibit 253. Photographs of checkbooks, photographs of credit cards, photographs of driver's licenses, photographs of passwords, photographs of, what else? The front of credit cards, the back of credit cards, Jericho Flynn's credit card information. Remember that testimony about how he was missing money when he was in Japan with the defendant? And this is not evidence of somebody who wasn't stealing. This is evidence of somebody who was. I think in his interview he said his parents knew and they thought it was for Twitch gaming. But the evidence indicates that that also is an untruth. Because there are no Twitch charge accounts. It's all myfreecams.com. And by the defendant's own words, his dad was a computer hacker. And you're going to tell me he didn't look up that charge? As a matter of fact, you'll see in the credit card statements disputes. Now, he gets confronted, finally, by his family. His brother, his mother, his dad. He runs off to his aunt's house. They stage an intervention to send him to Cornerstone Treatment Facility. He leaves the program. I think it was a 60-day program. He left very early. And even though he left early, that gave his father and his brother time to access Grant's computer and blow up his spot. In other words, I don't know the colloquial term for it, tell on him, to Sylvie and the group of people that he became acquainted with online. How do we know that's true? How do we know that I'm not just making that up? Because we have evidence of it. States Exhibit 251. Another document that was found in that thumb drive that was recovered from the defendant's pants pocket in his car at the hotel. Okay, that's where this came from, that thumb drive. And Mr. Stone read parts of this letter to you earlier in opening statement to drive home some points. But let me just tell you some sections that are relevant to what I'm talking about now. I think it's safe to say by now that everyone here knows I made a drastic mistake with Sylvie. I upset her. I made her very sad. I ruined the end of December and the beginning of January for her. I won't go into great detail because that's not the purpose of this message. But I lied to her. There's a theme here, by the way, if you haven't picked up on it. I lied to her and you guys from the beginning about myself. I'm not a professional gamer. I did not own my own house and did not drive a BMW. That means his dad told him he's a 29 or 30-year-old guy who lives at home with his parents and drives a Honda. While the money I have, which he doesn't have, and the tips I gave and the way that I was are very true, which they're not, I could never escape the lies I told at the very beginning because they always became a topic of conversation, I guess, in this chat room where they all get together and watch these videos. He explains his nursing career, and he explains his family. And I'll tell you, the reason why all this happened was because my family found out about her, the website, and all the money I'd been spending. I won't go into detail regarding my family, but it's a dysfunctional one at the very least. It's a dysfunctional family, notwithstanding anything you may have heard earlier in this case. This is a family in crisis. My father is controlling and abusive. My mother is simply around for the security. And my brother is also controlling and does not understand how I could care for someone as much as I care for Sylvie. I split from them, and they forced me into Cornerstone. Because they thought I had an unhealthy addiction. And if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. She is my everything. And I will give my life to simply be able to make her smile again. Don't lose her. I hope I can be with her again. And I hope I can be a part of that community again. And I'm sorry for what I did to her and to you. These are his words. Okay? And it goes on. I mean, I'm not reading the whole thing. You can read the whole thing. I've read it. So he leaves this facility. They have a meeting at the California Pizza Kitchen, or the California Pizza Grill. And Chad draws up an agreement, contract. Okay? So let's kind of go over some of that. Get a job. Reasonable. Let's see. Owes family $200,000. Owes family an apology. Needs therapy. Join the military. No further monetary support. We're not going to help you. This is critical, as Grant, through his past transgressions, has relied on the knowledge the family would not report him and would cover him. Family relationship abuse beyond tolerance. You will not ever be allowed back into the family living arrangement if you violate the terms of this agreement. Signed. Initial from date. So this is what he's confronted with, which is awful. The jig is up. So, then what happens? This is very bad. Very, very bad for the defendant. He can't talk to Sylvia anymore. It's over. It's done. Even if he could talk to her, his dad and his brother have sabotaged that relationship. He reached out on the 22nd to try to salvage it. Obviously, that didn't work. So, he has to devise a way to get Sylvie back. He has to figure this out. How is he going to do it? And remember, the state submits to you that this happened January the 4th, this contract. Blake Turpin testified that his gun was stolen 2 weeks before January 24th. So, in other words, after this agreement, after the quick order's done, before the apology letter, that gun was taken by the defendant. At that moment in time, he had begun his plan. And I'll tell you about premeditation in a little bit. It doesn't have to be weeks or months. It could be minutes, just a time to reflect. But in any event, 2 weeks in advance, he takes this gun. And he keeps it, he holds on to it. Goes back to the house. Sends that letter. Gets no response. Has to execute his plan. Has to be able to get back with Sylvie. Has to be able to have internet access, because if you remember in his interview, he had no internet access at the house, very limited. And so how do I show that his obsession with her was such that he'd be willing to murder his family? I don't have to show that at all. You know why? Because when I showed those pictures of Sylvie on the projector up there, I know some of you looked at him. And I know what you saw, because I saw the same thing. He was transfixed on those pictures. Tunnel vision on her. None of us were here for the few minutes that I was flipping through it. That conduct, quiet as it is, speaks volumes. So, what happened that night? Grant was home all day. Mom was at her office. Mom was doing work, sent emails. She sent chat messages. I do want to drive this point home. This kind of goes to that murder-suicide discussion I had a little bit earlier. This is a video from the body cam. This is that door going into the garage from the workout room. The door's shut. So when someone shoots themselves in the head, they don't close the door behind them. The door had to be open. And here it is. Good place. Technology. It's not going to play. All right. Well, the video's in evidence. You can watch it. The door's shut, and there's blood and tissue on the inside of that door, opposite the side where it was shut. doesn't go through, blood and tissue doesn't go through a wooden door. The door has to be open. The door was shut when the cops got there. Anyway, so Margaret at her desk, there's the text message, or the chat message, 4:44, last human interaction. So why? Why mom? Why mom? Because she was there. That's why. And because she also was limited in contact with Sylvia. She, and this is from the defendant's interview, she was allowing him to have limited contact with her through her phone. Limited. Don't go overboard. Now, somebody who's dropping 20 G's in one night on a woman is going to have a hard time when someone says, don't go overboard. So not only was she there, she was also in his way. And there was no other way to get to Chad and Cody without getting to mom. Investigator Bly testified there was no user activity after 4:44. That's where her body was found, shot in the back of the head by the defendant. He couldn't leave her there alive. He couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. And so then what happens? Chad, this is Chad going to work, CVS. Look at what he's wearing. Uses his right hand to open the keypad to get through there. Right-handed, remember that? Very important, right hand, left hand. Walks in, goes and sits at his desk. You're gonna get to that video in a minute. You'll see at his desk, if you watch very carefully, where is the mouse pad? Right side, not the left side. There he is, he sits down, turns the computer on, puts his glasses down, left arm in his lap, right arm working. Here he is leaving. Same outfit at 4:30. How do we know what time he left? Well, after Margaret was murdered, Bran had a window from about, let's say, 5 o'clock, 4:45, 5 o'clock, until Dad got home, about 5:25. How do we know when Dad got home? Well, we have the CVS records that show that Dad was clocking out. I'm showing 2:26. Access granted, 4:48, he leaves. Okay? We have the E-Pass records that show when he hits that Dean Roll Plaza, drives through there about, 1:24, 5 o'clock. Okay? So now we know. We are following him home on his job. We know what he was wearing. So then how do we know? How do we know what happens next? Investigator Bly and Chad's iPhone. And it's creepy. It is creepy what your phone has become. It's become an extension of our bodies. They'll probably be sewed into us at some point. This data sheet, I'm going to walk you through it slowly, and explain to you how we know what Chad did when he got home. Yes, ma'am. Okay. This is in 24-hour time. Investigator Bly testified as to what the conversion is, so let's follow along, shall we? 4:34. Is this thing working? There we go. 4:34. The phone is unlocked. Okay? And he is chatting with his son via text, which is a common way for the two to talk. He's sitting in that car for about 10 minutes. And we know what he's doing while he's sitting in the car because our phone is telling us what we're doing. He's chatting back and forth with his son, and he's talking to other people via text message. That's what he's doing. In case you're thinking that he's arming himself or putting a gun on backwards in that car, that's not what he's doing. Then He opens the iHeartRadio app, listens to Sean Hannity. Political opinions aside, he's listening to his radio. Thank you. He's listening to that application from 440. He plugs the phone in, the phone charger in his car. We know he has a phone charger in his car because we introduced the picture of the inside of his car with a phone charger in it. Plugged in. Phone is locked, the application starts playing, and we know it's plugged in because the battery's charging. 17:23. It's 5:23 on the 24th. Phone's unlocked, iHeartRadio's turned off, phone's unplugged, and he takes the last 67 steps of his life. 5:25, the phone stops. That phone was in Chad's back pocket. How do I know that? Because if you look at the CBS video when he's walking to his desk, you see the phone sticking out of his back pocket. That's how we know. 67 steps, gets into the house. The next activity on that phone, it's at 5:52. What's the math on that? Phone sits still for what, 20 minutes? It's when Grant shoots his dad in the head. Twice. The phone is unlocked. And the million-dollar question, how was Chad's phone unlocked? You can unlock a phone two different ways. With the passcode or with the finger. Either way. Chad's passcode was so obvious that an unrelated investigator could guess it. Chad's passcode is probably the passcode to half the people in this auditorium, in this courtroom. Your birthday. I'm not casting aspersions on you. So, either he guessed the passcode, or he picked up his dead dad's hand at this point, wiped it on the shirt, put the finger on the phone, and unlocked it. How do we think that's the case? Well, notwithstanding defense counsel's very admirable and skillful attempt to impeach medical examiner and investigators at the sheriff's office, nobody molested those fingers. Christine Snyder testified that when they do nail clippings, they don't touch, disturb anything. Plus, at this point, it's been many hours, and the blood on that hand, those hands are dry. So just by touching dried, bloody hands, if anyone's ever had bloody, dried blood on them, you just can't touch it and it falls off. I mean, you have to really either get something wet or really wipe on it to get it off. They didn't do that. What about this fingerprint scanning thing that the Amy testified to? Well, she wasn't there. She didn't know. She was referring to her report from somebody else. This is why we called Arthur Rubart back again for the 50th time. Because he was there the whole time. So we asked him, did anybody scan fingerprints? Nope. Is there any record of that? Nope. Would you have let anybody touch the body before you were done processing it? Absolutely not. So that's why he was called back. All right. Now, what's the next weird thing that happens that tells us this is the defendant, not Chad? Preferences application is accessing that phone. And what's in the preferences application? Settings. What settings were changed? You guys had questions about the screen staying on. Guess what setting was changed? The lock screen. Because we have the data to back it up. 283. This is that spreadsheet that Investigator Bly provided that gives you the entire history of when that phone was locked and unlocked from the beginning of January until the 25th of January. Locked, unlocked, locked, unlocked. Here's an example. First page. Unlocked, 1,400 seconds. Unlocked, 780 seconds. Let me find the longest one. Unlocked. Let's see. 1,100 seconds. Okay. Let's go to the goods. The end of the report. The 24th and the 25th. And go through it. Don't take my word for it. Unlocked. January 24th started at 5:52. Was not relocked until 21 after midnight on the 25th. It's unlocked for 23,320 seconds. That's not normal for this phone. That's not the pattern of life. for this phone, for Chad's phone, for how Chad behaves with his phone. This is the action of someone who didn't want to have to re-enter a passcode or touch his dead dad's finger a million times to unlock the phone. Don't take my word for it. Now, then what happens? Every note is accessed out of the blue, 584 seconds. And the notes are in evidence. You can look at them. Text messages come in, not being responded to. You know, what's the defendant going to say? He doesn't know who these guys are. Then what happens? Safari's opened up. SlidePod safe reset. Entered in the search bar. This is the defendant doing this. The defendant is trying to get into a safe. And he can't. Because that safe was locked. If you remember from the testimony of the crime scene folks, that key button safe was never opened. Here comes a text message, 1845. This is the defendant. The state would submit to you, this is the defendant, sending a text to his brother, trying to figure out when his brother's going to get home. That's what's going on there. He's working on his timeline. So at this point, he's thinking it's a full night. Full night is late. Next page. Okay? Now we're at, 2027. Okay? It's about, 21 is 9 o'clock, so we're at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, messages are being reviewed. Nothing's being sent. And remember, Jennifer Sawyer said between 8:30 and 9:30, and mind you, there's not a whole lot of activity here on this phone. She hears no more than 5 shots ring out in the middle of the night, which she thought was peculiar. No more than 5. Well, what is that indicative of? This goes back to Cody's gun. This is the point in the night when Gran Amato went outside, because you can hear gunshots outside of a house much better than you can hear them inside of a house. That's how she heard it. Pops off 4 rounds, collects the shell cases, planning the murder-suicide story. That's what's going on here. 2328. 1128. Safari search for how to wipe an iPhone. Remember that conversation with Investigator Bly? How to wipe an iPhone without a password? States Exhibit 244 and 245. At this point, Cody Amato's home and already been killed. Okay? Cody got home about 10 o'clock. It was after that. And he's doing a search on how to wipe an iPhone. And whose phone is he trying to wipe? And we know whose phone he's trying to wipe because of evidence. Physical, forensic, computer evidence. Cody's phone. Right here. Right here in front of you. Why is he trying to do that? Why? What is on Cody's phone? He can't access Cody's phone. For some reason, he can't access it. He's trying to wipe it the hard way. What's on there? Well, Sloan Young testified that Cody had a Blink camera in his bedroom. Okay? And defense counsel presented to you text messages where Cody says to his father, and this is the defense's case, Cody says to his father that, hey, Dad, would you delete the Blink app, please? Why would they have the Blink camera in Cody's room? Cody's room had a computer in it. And who's not supposed to touch computers? Guess what wasn't found in Cody's room? Remember that testimony? Blink camera. So what happens? Gran Amato goes into Cody's room, and frankly, I think, and don't quote me, but I'm fairly certain in his interview, he said he went to Cody's room to get some USB drives, to get his stuff, make copies. And that Blink camera catches him. Now, we don't have the video, obviously. If we did, we'd show it to you. But we know that at about 9/11, that's when he went in there. Because unlike every other method by which Cody and Chad discussed life with each other, phone calls were on the list. And you have the phone records, you can look at them. It's text, text, text. 4 phone calls from Cody's phone. 2 to the house line and 2 to Chad's phone. 4 calls total. Not normal. And these 2 calls on the call screen are the 2 calls that were deleted from the iPhone. Remember that testimony? Those calls were not on the recent screen. Investigator Bly had to dig real, real deep to find it. So, the phone then, what happens next? Cody comes home at about 10 o'clock and he's shot. He's drawn home based on those 4 calls. How to wipe an iPhone? We talked about that already. Amato goes upstairs right after he searches how to wipe an iPhone. Why does he go upstairs to do that? Because Cody's computer's upstairs, his computer's upstairs. So he takes Cody's phone to his computer with the instructions on how to wipe an iPhone on Dad's phone to his room and plugs it in. That's what this is. That's those steps going upstairs. Not Dad going outside and following Grant all around the house. Because Dad's dead. #25th. USAA Bank is accessed for 723 seconds. 723 seconds, and what happens? That application is accessed via fingerprint. We know that because we have the records for the USAA showing that, and remember, this is in Central Time, so do the math conversion in your head, it's 1 hour. This is 11:08, so that would be 12:08 Eastern Time, okay? Phone, the application is logged on with a fingerprint. Dad's dead and fingerprint, because Dad is downstairs at this point in time. Okay? And what happened? Again, Investigator Bly digs in deep into the phone and finds a rebuilt webpage that shows that Amato visited within the USAA app instructions on how to unblock account access. And so what does he do? He adds himself as an authorized transferee on Dad's USAA account. And how do we know that to be the case? Don't take my word for it. We have more records, official records from USAA. And attached to that is the detail here that says that he called this account PNC Son. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The account holder being Grant Amato with an account number. Okay, transfer capability to Grant only. And the date here, 11:19 p.m. Central Time. So we go back, 11:19, that would be 12:19 Eastern Time, falls right in our timeline. Okay? Now, just for your own personal knowledge, go the extra step to make sure that there's no question that this account was Grant Amato's account. We have the records from PNC. And the account number on the records from PNC for Grant Amato matched the account number for the account that was added to Dad's USA account. Same account number. What did the defendant mess up here? PNC Son. That's what he called it, PNC Son. If the father was alive, which he wasn't, but if he was, would he call this transferee account PNC Son? No, because he would have had 2 sons at that time. Because Cody would have been alive still. So it would have said PNC Grant or PNC GTA, or you know what I mean? Not PNC Son. How is he supposed to know which son it is? That's how we know this is the defendant, because he was thinking of only himself. And he was the only one alive that was left. The phone then travels a little further. It's plugged in. And at 12:31, the phone's unlocked again. And what happens at 12:31? Anybody remember? The Blink application is deleted from Dad's phone. And when you delete the Blink application, any videos that are on that application are deleted with it. That's Investigator Bly's testimony. He couldn't get to Cody's phone. He couldn't wipe Cody's phone. Why do you think Cody's phone wasn't at the house? Now, Bran Amato says he left the house at midnight, okay? At 12:30. The USB drive activity stops at, I believe it's 12:37. But Bran Amato was in that house much later than that. And how do we know that to be the case? Well, I just told you. Bran could not leave Cody's phone in that house. That phone had incriminated evidence. It had call records, it had a Bleep application. He couldn't unlock it. You know, sometimes when your fingerprints used too many times, you got to put the passcode in on the iPhones. Right? He couldn't get to it. So what did he do? Well, he took the phone with him. Maybe he threw it in a lake. Maybe he threw it in a dumpster with the black clothes he was wearing that night. Maybe he threw it, smashed it with a hammer. Who knows? But there were three things that were missing from that home. Cody's phone, the murder weapon, and the defendant. No coincidence. So, I want to talk to you about what the defendant did after that. He left the house at 2:05. How do we know 2:05? Because remember George Reineth, the FBI fellow, testified about that RTT real-time tool that measures where the phone was located at a given point in time in an arc. Remember that testimony? It's a measurement that's based on the speed of light. We haven't yet figured out how to speed up, so it's pretty darn accurate. The last time that Cody's phone pinged off any tower was at 2:05 in the morning. And Grant didn't leave that phone behind. They searched the yard. Remember Sirius Cinnamon Bark, the puppy dog? Searched the yard, couldn't find the phone. The phone wasn't in the house. That phone was with him. So the defendant was in that house until 2:05. He wasn't driving around nowhere, anywhere, no place in particular. He didn't meet his brother, right? That's all a bunch of untruths. We do know where he went next. About 3 o'clock in the morning, he ended up at Publix. And how do we know that? Because a fellow from Publix came in and testified that the first time the unique address that's assigned to that Surface Pro that was found in the defendant's hotel room hit up on the Publix network was at 2:56 in the morning. So it makes much more sense, if you're using your common sense, that Gran Amato didn't leave that house until after 2. Because he got to Publix at almost 3, 2:56. Here's your finger. Okay, thank you. It's HDMI. Okay. There you go. There's that finger. Clean as a whistle. No other blood was scraped off any of those other fingers. The left hand covered in blood too. The top of that cuticle is clean. The bottom of that finger is clean. That is not some CSI person making a boo-boo. That is not some fingerprint scanner. That didn't happen. There you go. There's the FBI data I was talking about. 2:05. In that arc, in the crime scene. That's when he left, because that phone was with him. Publix Wi-Fi records. Okay? There it is. Hits the network at 2:53. Light surface. And he's on till about, what's that say, about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:02. What's he looking at? And that's very hard to read and very small. But I'll read it to you, because I can move around here. He starts by checking his email at 2:55. And this item is also in evidence. And then by 3:02, he's hitting up my free cams. 3:02:43, he's at Sylvie's webpage. Then he's reinstituting his account restoration, 3:06. His parents and his brother's bodies aren't even cold. And he's already re-establishing or trying to re-establish contact with Sylvie. How do we know that his plan was a murder-suicide? Because in the defendant's car is a folder. In that folder is the note. The note that is written as Cody. Why does Grant Amato have this note in his car? Because Grant Amato wrote it. He admitted that he wrote it. That's what Investigator Anderson testified to. And why isn't that note at 2112 Sultan Circle? Well, there's an answer to that too. Is the audio on, Judge? Okay.
From there, I pretty much just drove around. I was thinking of, like, passing by the house, but I never really decided against it. And then I was
Thinking about driving by the house, decided against it.
You saw nothing that was out of the ordinary.
no.
In the work Christmas area or 419 area,
No, I mean,
it's
Yeah, another untruth. Two of them. Because later he says, I saw news vans and police cars, and I didn't want to know, and I didn't want to believe it. No, he had the suicide note that he was going to drop off at the crime scene. And because concerned coworkers called in, that was stopped. That's why he turned around, not because he was afraid. Investigator Stewart testified he didn't even look up what happened to his parents. Remember that testimony from yesterday? He made a big deal about the porno searches on that other document, and defense counsel said, oh, you know, we didn't see whether he looked up anything else. Yes, we did. Yeah, there's nothing there. It's very convincing, it being untrue. Very convincing.
because when Cody called the house, you said your mom told him about the argument.
Right.
And when you left, you said you told your mom you were in the area.
Right.
How then does Cody now know where to meet you, or if he's gonna meet you?
yeah, because that's when my mom had come out where I said that I was going to be on that road somewhere. And then she was able to do that. And then I guess that's how she knew, like, where, I don't know if she talked to Cody again or she was able to do that. But then she was able to, like, pinpoint that area.
Sounds good.
What else happened? Then after I met with Cody, then that's where, you know, I was again just kind of staying around that area. And then I just went to the public. And then to my knowledge, I mean, I was like, that was the last interaction that I had with the 3 members of my family was that.
The last interaction he had with his family was when he shot his brother in the face.
And then I had met with my brother before he came home, just like in the neighborhood area. And then it was just on the like the back side of the house, like along, I don't remember what that road is called, but it's like you take the bend where it has those 2 blinking lights, and then it's just down that road.
That didn't happen. Remember? That part of the interview later on? It was all, I believe, Investigator Moltari's words were bullshit. But it sounded true.
So then, yeah, I spoke to Cody. He told me about all that. He had given me his debit to that because I don't have the money and I don't know where to go. You know, I've never been out of the house on my own. And then the last thing that I was told was just that, you know, basically once again, I don't take care of it because
This is Cody.
this is Cody.
What time is this?
I'd say a little after 10:30ish at night. From there, I pretty much just drove around. I was thinking of, like, passing by the house, but I never really decided against it. And then my mom, that, you know, I'm going to be close, I'm going to be local, I'm going to be, like, down the street. And then,
You left.
so I left. And then,
What time do you think you left about? It's 6:30, the argument started. How long do you think before you left?
I'd say, like, 9:30 or so.
He's all over the place. Now, what happens after he goes to the Publix and he tries to reconnect with Sylvie? He goes on a job interview. Erica Johansson testified, 9 o'clock in the morning. Said he looked tired, had bloodshot eyes, and had some other adjectives for him that I'm not going to bother repeating. I think you'll remember them. Goes to his hotel where he was found. With him, he has the debit and credit cards and passport and a duffel bag. And whose cards does he have? Well, according to the defendant, the man who threw him out of the house, grabbed him by the throat, or the shirt, excuse me, and told him if he came back, he was going to kill him, was benevolent enough to give him his USAA check card. Well, that doesn't make any walking around sense. He said Cody gave him his debit card. No, Cody was dead. Bran took it. Not only did he take his debit card, he took his credit card. And we have the pictures of what was found in Cody's wallet, and if you take a look at it, that if that was true, which it's not, but if it was true that he gave him the payment methods, then Cody had nothing, no way to buy anything in his wallet. He had no check card, he had no credit card. That wasn't given to him, it was taken. Just like this $200,000 was taken. And in that bag is a set of black gloves. Black gloves that have GSR on. You heard about transfer on cross-examination from the defense, and if the gloves are in a place where there's guns before, and is it possible that this could happen? I think we heard the word possible about 15 times in our testimony and cross-examination. Remember, the burden here is reasonable, not possible. But regardless, there's GSR on those gloves. And they're his gloves. His DNA is on those gloves. And you may ask yourself, well, why isn't there any blood on those gloves? He had to touch the bodies. It's a great question. And I would answer that question with this statement. The defendant had hours of time to throw out anything and any blood on it. We don't know if he used those gloves to move the bodies. We don't know if he wiped them down and just didn't wipe off all the GSR. Right? He had the opportunity to do that because nobody else was coming home after Cody came home. This is physical evidence. You know, the suicide note, the gloves. He thought he figured it out. You know, maybe you want to ask yourself, well, why on earth would he still be here? Why would he stay here? Because he thought he had it figured out, folks. He thought he had devised a way to where he could eliminate everybody that was in his way. Sylvie, look like a victim, still have an opportunity to give a statement, a story to the police and be cleared. But the evidence points otherwise. His cockiness, his arrogance got the better of him. That's one reason why he didn't leave. What could be the other reason? Why would you take your passport with you and hang out in a hotel and go on the internet trying to reconnect with this woman who lives in Bulgaria? Woman you're obsessed with, you have money now, right? You have credit cards and you've added yourself as an account holder. So if you have money, you can travel. If you want to leave the country, you have to have a passport. He's just waiting for her to say, I love you too. Come to Bulgaria. Come see me. And that didn't happen. That's why he was here. And because the police acted fast, he didn't get a chance to leave. Folks, I want to show you the tacit admission. This is from the interview.
You are in a position whether or not they will be allowed. That's not your job. All right, I'm ready. Let him go. Just remember that. Just like Mom, Cody, and Dad love you. Nobody loves you any more or any less.
You already made the decision as to whether they were going to let him live or die. And he just sat there. Well, listen, he said in the interview he didn't do it. I can't dispute that. But you have to ask yourself, is this a reasonable response when you're confronted by your brother to sit there? You made the decision to kill Cody, Mom, and Dad? We know that he's capable of emotions. He's cried from time to time in court here today. A couple other things before I sit down. This is a record from USAA Bank. You know, he says that Cody gave him his debit card for necessities. On January 24th, going into the 25th, after the murders, Cody's debit card gets a bill for $599.99 to the website. That's a necessity to him. That's a necessity. Couple more points, and then I'll wrap it up. Defense made on cross-examination, made some inferences with regard to Grant divorcing himself from firearms. And that's true. Here's the receipts. There's a pawn sheet too. He sold his guns. He sold his guns to get money. Why does he need money? I think we know why he needs money. Do I have to say it again? Okay? It's true. This was in 2018, which means there were no guns in that closet. For 6 months, 5 months. And the gloves that were found that arguably could have transfer on them, we don't know. Allison Lamine testified that while gunshot residue doesn't dissipate, environmental factors make it move over a period of time. Air conditioning, right? Whether you actually go to your closet to put stuff away, for example. So the argument, therefore, is over the course of 4 or 5 months, did this defendant never go into his closet? Did he never touch anything? We know he went in there to get gloves, at least for Japan, right? Did he ever go in there to put clothes away or dig around through stuff? Made it perfectly secure and sterile so this GSR would just sit there forever? No, it's ridiculous. A couple points I want to hit from buzzwords that I think you might remember. Complete lack of physical evidence linking Grant to the deaths of his parents and brother. I think I've talked long enough to show you there's physical evidence that ties Grant to the deaths of his brother, his mother, and his father. Bran Amato had no firearm with which to commit these offenses because he had sold all his guns and had no access to any other guns that might have been in the residence. He sold his guns, but he found another one. Bran Amato had no formal training with firearms. Remember these pictures? Exhibit 306, Exhibit 307, 308, 309. Left-handed shooting, right-handed shooting. An nefarious combination of drugs, guns, and ammunition. Ammunition doesn't kill anybody unless it's in a gun. There were 3 guns in the house, 1 in a safe, 1 was Cody's and 1 on Chad's hip, and pot. Bran Amato knew about blood, he knew about DNA, he knew how to shoot. But after you murder your family, you make mistakes. And I pointed out the mistakes he's made, including the firearm being on Chad backwards, including the digital evidence that we were able to locate, including the bank records, including all the cellular data, including the Wi-Fi records, deleted records, deleted applications, right? It's a stressful situation being a murderer. You're bound to make mistakes. Thank you.